Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to tonight's live stream here on Star Wars Lads. Hopefully, you're all having a great Tuesday so far. We're here to talk about the latest and greatest in the world of Star Wars, including some massive news that dropped yesterday about Adam Driver and the possible Kylo Ren slash Ben Solo movie that was in the works, The Hunt for Ben Solo, which we're going to talk about the timeline for that, the talent that was attached, Steven Soderbergh, who was writing the project and supposedly going to direct it before it was shot down over by Disney. We're going to talk about that news as well as a variety of other stories. And of course, as always, this is our live Q&A stream. So make sure you send in your questions, your comments, anything you'd like to discuss. It can be about this film and this particular project, or it could be about anything else you would like to discuss. The point is, send it into the chat and we will get to it. We usually do first come, first serve in our chats. The exception is, of course, super chat. If you send in a super chat, bumps you up to the top. We automatically and will immediately answer your question, barring, and being in the middle of another question. You can also join our Patreon or YouTube membership programs. If you're of a certain tier, you get priority chat access. So check those out. We have a lot of other great perks as well on top of just the chat priority. We also have a poll running here. Would you like to have seen the Adam Driver, Steven Soderbergh Hunt for Ben Solo film? Right now, it's 100% of people voting yes, and I am part of that 100%, although I did not vote. But yes, we would have loved to see it too. We're going to talk all about it, so make sure you let us know what you thought of the project and your thoughts on this whole thing in the chat. Make sure you like the stream if you haven't right now. More people are watching than have liked the stream. Really helps out our channel. Just scroll down, hit that like button. It's easy, free, and it helps us out a lot. You can also subscribe if you're new. If you're new and just finding us on replay, or this is your first week joining us for a live stream, make sure you subscribe. We do this every week. We talk about Star Wars and a variety of other things. Star Wars is our main focus, but we talk about comics sometimes. We talk about DC and Marvel. We talk about other film projects. We talk about other pop culture stuff going on. So this is a great place to join us if you like talking pop culture and anything in that specific sphere. You can send in your questions and join us every single week. All right, as we let more and more people continue to come in here to the stream, let's start talking about the Adam Driver news. So this was a big kind of bombshell that dropped fairly, I'm pretty sure fairly intentionally. I think he knew what he was doing. But in an interview with the Associated Press, Adam Driver revealed that he and Steven Soderbergh, along with others, had been putting together a script for a post Rise of Skywalker movie focused on the redemption of Ben Solo. That was ultimately killed by Disney CEO Bob Iger and the head of Disney Films, Alan Bergman. So, according to Driver, he says, I was always interested in doing another Star Wars. I've been in talks about doing another one since 2021. Kathleen Kennedy reached out. I always said with a great director and great story, I'd be there in a second. I loved the character and I loved playing him. We presented the script to Lucasfilm. They loved the idea. They totally understood our angle and why we were doing it. We took it to Bob Iger and Alan Bergman, and they said no. They didn't see how Ben Solo was alive, and that was that. It was called The Hunt for Ben Solo, and it was really cool. But it is no more, so I can finally talk about it. Well, I mean, you didn't talk about it for a long time, Adam, so there must be a reason why you're talking about it now, unless it is maybe it was still up in the air on like maybe this could possibly happen, even though they said no. Maybe they just said no in the last year. Doesn't really make sense if the project originally came about in 2021. Bob Iger wasn't back in the fold until 2022, the end of 2022. So if it was Bob Iger that he pitched it to, it had to be 2023 most likely. So it's been post 2023 that the official pitch was denied. But still, there's a lot of information here and a lot of speculation. I mean, this type of stuff happens all the time when it comes to talent and actors, especially actors, because they seemingly, when they're at the top of their game, are able to make these types of leaks per se in order to get projects off the ground, versus filmmakers a little more careful with what information they reveal in order to be able to work with these studios on other projects. Adam Driver is, for all intents and purposes, the face of the sequels. He and Daisy Ridley. We know Daisy Ridley's coming back. I've been talking about for years. I made a video over 2 years ago about how I thought Ben Solo would be coming back into the story. I think it only makes sense. I mean, we basically got no Ben Solo. We've had basically no Ben Solo in the entirety of canon. Almost every week, it seems like somebody's bringing up, well, how can you fix Ben Solo, or how can you add story to Ben Solo, or what would you do with Ben Solo? How does Luke's Jedi Order work? How does Ben Solo's, why is he not there post Rey going to Tatooine with the Skywalkers, the Force Ghost? I've always thought that he was, by giving his life's force to Rey, part, because they're a dyad, almost becoming part of her. Like he's like a voice in her head. That's what more my theory has always been, that he would be a voice in her head, kind of was his spirit within him, within her, because he doesn't show up at the end. He's like an incomplete form almost. His spirit has merged with hers in some way. And I thought, through the whatever Star Wars magic they want to do, or explanation they want to bring up, or force whatever they want to do, they could find a way to maybe go from a dyad to one being to back to a dyad again, and be able to almost pull his soul out of her and reincarnate slash resurrect Ben Solo in a way, if they wanted to do that. And I think they still can. What's interesting about this, obviously, the number one piece, other than the politics around, studio stuff and people rejecting it and all that stuff, all the minutia of getting a film made. The most interesting thing is it's post Rise of Skywalker, right? So Ben Solo's alive after disappearing into the Force. We do know that Steven Soderbergh has never watched The Rise of Skywalker. He is somebody who seems to religiously rewatch Star Wars, or at least was while writing the script. In 2023 and 2024, he logged the Attack of the Clones, The Phantom Menace, and A New Hope twice on his account, as well as The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and Revenge of the Sith, Solo, and Rogue One all once each year. And then didn't watch any of the sequels and has said he's never seen The Rise of Skywalker. So is this like a full-on retcon? Is this a full-on, like, in my head canon, if they wanted to do the idea, or had a similar idea to what I had, you could almost do this kind of introspective movie where everything happens through Ben Solo, and the whole mystery is like, well, why is he alive? What's going on? Where is he? How is this post Rise of Skywalker? What's going on? And it's almost this kind of like purgatory-esque story of like him being pulled back into reality. And then at the end, it's kind of revealed that he's, whatever he goes through spiritually kind of brings him back to the real world, brings him back as a corporeal form, if you will. I think that would have been really interesting. I mean, that's a hard sell for an audience, right? It's another one of those like it was all a dream type of things. But I think it could have been interesting. But regardless, I think what everybody can agree on is the fact that Adam Driver, seemingly and arguably the most talented actor that worked in any of the sequel films, or at least of the big characters, and Steven Soderbergh, who's been a very prolific filmmaker for 30 years, wanting to make a Star Wars movie and it doesn't happen is kind of a shock. And I think anytime you get somebody as prolific as Steven Soderbergh interested in franchise filmmaking, I think you should jump on it. But what are your thoughts, Sonic, on what the story could have been, whether this could happen in the future, and just overall the whole project, we have learned a little bit of more information over the last couple days about it?
Well, as Badusai alludes to in the comments, I think some of you guys might have never actually been on Star Wars Lads before, so welcome to our channel. We had a tweet kind of go viral where I mentioned that I think Soderbergh, what he just said, like, "Oh, I had a lot of fun making this movie in my head, but we're not going to see it, right?" I think that's absolute bait. Like, there's no way, especially with this being fully reported as like an interview with Adam Driver on AP News, the Associated Press, right? Like that's as neutral as it gets, that's as factual as it gets. That's that's like the gold standard these days, right? And it's been for so long. So for them to chime in like this, yeah, it is very Deadpool-esque, like you're saying. I think it's gonna be made. I think just the way I've seen the fandom react, like, it's been a very quiet 4 or 5 months. Like, other Star Wars YouTubers have literally made videos about this thing, like, "Yeah, anything we put out, right? It just doesn't work." Like, even the rage bait channels have all kind of died away. There just hasn't been any, like, significant Star Wars content since Andor Season 2. And this having the level of, like, being like, "Oh, wow," like, this feels like almost like a movie is ready to come out, like, this feels like how it was during the peak days of talking about the sequels, talking about the anticipation, all the theories, all the leaks, right? And this being such a significant one with all the details that were proposed, yeah, it doesn't seem accidental, it seems very much like, "Yeah, you said no, but well, let's test out the fandom." So when I say bait, maybe it's a little bit more accurate to say it's like a fishing lure, like, and it's meant for the fandom. It's like, are you gonna latch on? Are we gonna have a great day out on our fishing boat, or are we just gonna like have a couple like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, and I mean, especially with just the small, like, but significant uptick in everything that's been going on today. Obviously, today would have been Carrie Fisher's 69th birthday, so there's always a little bit of a somber note, a little bit more extra attention on this day. The last, the final, or no, sorry, the Last Order book came out today as well for a lot of people. Like, there is a little bit more tension. The sequels are being fleshed out with stuff like Legacy of Vader. We heard about the Legacy novel and everything like that. It's been slowly creeping up and up and up, and especially with how people weren't very happy about the Mandalorian and Grogu teaser, seeing just how, like, fervent everybody, the haters and the diehards, are just like, "Yes, why would this be canceled? Why would you take away the most talented actor and, like, you know, the linchpin, arguably, of the entire trilogy, a director who's had such notable classics and is just such an efficient filmmaker." He's never really been in any sort of trouble with his filmmaking. He's always been, like, a very direct, straightforward, gets his films funded, and he gets it shot in any way possible, right? So it's a name. It's on auteur by today's standards for sure, if not for the last 40 years, definitely an auteur. And you have a great writing team, and you have this whole idea, and then you have him researching and, like, leaving all these clues and stuff, and then going to this big AP News interview, which has him talking a lot about Adam Driver's career and everything else, and doubling down on how much he actually really does enjoy the character, that everyone was like, "Oh, he doesn't wanna actually come back. Driver's done with Star Wars." He mentioned before that he wanted that inverse Vader that never came about, and now he's like, "No, no, as long as the story is great, I'm there for it," right? And, come on, like, it's frustrating to hear that Iger and Bergman can say no because they don't really see how this would work or how this would make sense. Episode 9 is a patchwork of ideas. It is literally as corporate as a Star Wars film unfortunately gets, and Star Wars has never truly been like a corporate franchise. And this is an example of a film that, yes, obviously Carrie passed away. A lot of things had to shift around. We didn't know COVID was just around the corner and would shut down the world. So it's, in some way, it's a miracle that we even got this film out and made $1 billion before a couple months later we would have had no chance of that. And it just wasn't well beloved by people who loved or hated The Last Jedi, people who loved The Force Awakens but hated The Last Jedi, people who didn't like The Force Awakens and like Last Jedi prequels, all that. It was just like cool lore, Dark Empire adaptation, kind of all bunched together, and a character that was so good in Episode 8 in Kylo Ren just gets diminished. I love what they do with Rey. Again, it is, we've been harping on this channel. It is definitely Daisy Ridley's best performance. Adam Driver could have taken another step forward, just as great as he was in 7, just as even better as he was in 8. He was just waiting, and he still delivers in the moments he's given, but it's almost like an afterthought. And for him to not get a single line as Ben Solo, like, it's at least nice that he personified Ben Solo. There was the whole leak that he, like, fell down the chasm never to be seen again, that made people super worried. At least he was, like, there, and he, like, revived Rey and sacrificed himself. He actually did stuff as a character, but he just embodied it. He didn't get to actually speak as him. We don't get to have a little bit more context about him. We got flashbacks to Leia. We got flashbacks to Luke. We have a better understanding about all the backstory for Rey, but nothing about Ben Solo, and that is a tragedy that Episode 9 would again being like a 2.5 hour film when it should have been 3 hours. It had a lot of chances to flesh out, connect all the details, make it more interconnected. Being rushed out, Ian went Kathleen and JJ were like, "We need more time," and Bob Iger said, "No, like, this has to come out," and he admits that in his own autobiography. This being rejected is like, okay, like, wow, this it's kinda shocking. When you know episode 9 did not deliver to the same level that you expected for this to be the conclusion of the Skywalker saga. Can it still be a conclusion? Yes, but how do you take the Skywalker saga to the next steps? How do you continue the story? And we've been stuck in this limbo for so long, and then finding out this very detailed report, the name of a film, the talent attached to it, and being like, "Oh, no, but Iger is like, I don't see how that would work." Like, it boggles my mind. Like, Kathleen, for all the, criticism that she's gotten, some justified, a lot definitely not. It's really disheartening to see that she was like, "Yeah, I'd love to develop this idea." They got it to a full script stage, and Iger and Bergman were like, no, I don't see how that would work when we have somehow Palpatine return." Right? It's a bit of an overblown line in episode 9, but still, like, we just had seen that happen less than 5 years before, and you're saying you can't see in any shape or form Ben Solo being revived. That's frustrating. I've honestly been pretty happy for with a lot of the stuff that's come out of the Disney era. I think that they have made good choices, even with the streaming bubble exploding and all that. There have been missteps for sure. There have been products that I don't think have been as good as they should have been, but I've still been mostly pretty positive about it. This is just a decision where it's like you're going back to the heart of what it meant to like make Star Wars with a very artistic vision, with talent that really wants to be around, with the opportunity to continue the sequel cast when they're so close to their age when they concluded the sequel trilogy, which was not afforded to the prequel trilogy cast and definitely not to the original trilogy cast. And you're like, no, I don't believe that this idea would work for the character. I it's frustrating. I'm not mad because I think this is literally a very calculated move, and there's no way Iger and the Disney board doesn't know something like this is coming out. And even if they want to make like a like, oh, like we don't really want to work with Adam, like kind of make disconnect with that, that'll only make them look worse. This is a very strong push forward by Soderbergh, by Driver, in some shape or form. I think this has to happen now. And this is not like Deadpool was like, "Oh, look at this cool concept and how everybody enjoyed it." This is something that everybody coming out episode 9 is like, "We just wish we actually had time with Ben Solo." And this is a film that's literally giving us the chance to engage with Ben Solo. It could have been very mixed in with the world between worlds. It could have been very much like Force Ghost. It could have been him being trapped in the dyad with the netherworld of the Force, flipping and switching bodies, like I mentioned before with Rey. This can also become another film featuring Rey, right? And if you want to use that character and build up to the new Jedi Order, right? This could be like a big adventure for her a couple years after everything going on with Starfighter, and you can build out all these other characters. It slots in so nicely conceptually to me. If it needs adjustments, I think this is one of the most malleable concepts out there. And the fact that they're like, yeah, we looked at Empire Strikes Back, we're going to keep this fairly low budget and keep this more focused on the character, very insular. It's like, again, that also fits the financial changes that Iger has really been emphasizing since his return. Like, we need to make quality over quantity. We really want to make sure we're investing our money. We want to make sure our productions aren't just blowing through post production and all that. All these things are lined up. Maybe Soderbergh and Driver like talking a little too much and not like giving significant proof. Like some of it is just maybe a half truths. But the fact that they are so confident in something like this, the fact that they were developing it for 2 years suggests to me that it was a very significantly real thing, and I don't think it'll be canceled at this point. I think this is just them being almost like playing a big chess move here, like knight forward and being like, I'm ready to checkmate you. Make your move right now, just accept, and everybody will be happier for it." And this is the one thing that will actually line up so well with what they're trying to do in the post-sequel era while still giving a lot of love and credibility to the sequels. Like, why? Why? I'm just so confused with why that decision has come about, and I really hope that it gets undone.
Yeah, and I think really the big key for whether this happens is, I mean, this is the first step, right? Checking the pulse of the fandom, seeing if anybody wants this. And I understand, like from a business perspective, I understand taking a step back from the sequels as a whole. They did for the most part. By if this was pitched 2023, beginning of 2023, outside of the misstep that was Obi-Wan with mixed reception, but still incredibly high viewership, you were coming off of Andor, which was maybe underwatched, but a huge success critically. You're coming off of Obi-Wan, which is a huge success financially for them, but maybe mixed critically, and Boba Fett, which was mixed reviewed and mixed watched, right? So you're coming off of 2022 into 2023. You've got Star Wars Celebration in Europe with the Ahsoka trailer and the excitement around Thrawn that was coming out of that. You got Mandalorian season 3, which is supposed to be your big, huge hit. Star Wars was still at the streaming peak and they were still trying to figure out what's going on with film. So, like, putting a lot of this in perspective, I understand wanting to take a step back from the sequels. I understand wanting to take a step back from Star Wars film and readjust and refigure all this out. But what I don't understand is like just purely canceling it from a story perspective. If it was just we don't really see how this fits Kylo Ren, we don't see why he's alive, which they also Adam Driver and Steven Soderbergh yet to reveal why he's alive still post Rise of Skywalker. So there still could be some questions that, like, obviously we didn't hear the pitch. So as fans, maybe the pitch was just crazy and they just thought, nobody's going to watch this type of movie if it was some type of spiritual thing. Um, but I think when you have the talent, they're asking to be part of franchise filmmaking. There's not too many times you get somebody who makes as many original projects as Soderbergh gets off the ground, and he seems to have one almost every year get off the ground and out in theaters to varying levels of success financially, but still, because I don't think as great as Soderbergh is and as big of a name in film circles as he is, he doesn't draw the box office like the top tier talent. So like I could see all the business side for this, but what I don't really understand is that Adam Driver is by far your biggest draw in terms of actors in your trilogy. He's brought on the talent. According to the interview, he's the one that approached Soderbergh, not Soderbergh approached him because Lucasfilm reached out to him. So like if Lucasfilm was interested in making a Kylo Ren movie or bringing Kylo Ren back or making a Ben Solo movie in some fashion, then why did they drop it after this project was made? Why didn't they just say, well, let's go in another direction with this story, or let's go with another type of Ben Solo story? Because there's 20 plus years of Ben Solo stories to tell before The Force Awakens. There's also a million ways you can bring him back after Rise of Skywalker. So if this particular story didn't work, why didn't they keep going with development on that? There's got to be another little missing piece here on why they just dropped the idea of a Ben Solo movie altogether. And maybe it was Adam Driver. Maybe he was like, well, if I don't work with Steven Soderbergh, I'm not doing it. And they were like, okay, well, we don't want to do this project. And that was why they went out. They went out as a team. But yeah, there's so many things that don't necessarily make sense about this whole story that I think we're gonna see a lot of this stuff eventually revealed here. I hope it does happen. I mean, I think it's interesting when you look at the landscape of the post sequel films. You've got Starfighter coming in a little less than 2 years. You've got this Ray movie that's up in flux, which personally to me, I would rather wait on the Ray movie now if we were able to bring Ben back before the Ray movie, because I just think they work so much better as a duo. To me, the best everything that's great about both of their characters in The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker is always when both of them are together. When they're separated, they don't work as well, especially Rey doesn't work as well. And so I think it's interesting to have them both together. And maybe that's the missing piece for the Rey movie is having been there and part of her story. Because the whole idea of the dyad, the building up of that, it's like, they're two beings. They're destined to be together, not in a romantic way as much as like in a power way and as a team. If you remove one half of that, you kind of lose half of that, right? So I don't know. I'm intrigued to see what they do. What does this mean for Ray's movie? I mean, Ray's movie seems like something that may or may not ever happen. We haven't talked about in almost a year the Kinberg stuff. What's going on with that? In the Kinberg story originally, if I remember correctly, it was not announced that he was directing anything. He was writing and producing. Could this movie somehow get folded into whatever he was working on as maybe a first chapter? And then you have Starfighter as almost the like prequel or the prologue, and then you have the Ben Solo movie as the first chapter, then whatever Kinberg's working on as this maybe the middle chapter, and then the Rey movie is the final chapter that reignites this entire era and gets us closer to what we ultimately wanted to do originally with New Jedi Order. I think there's a lot of chips that need to fall here, but I'm really hoping that they do see the fan kind of enthusiasm around this. There's quite a bit of enthusiasm and backlash around this whole thing. We'll see if these people actually would have shown up for this film, but I do think if you had one bankable star from the sequels, it is Adam Driver, more so than Daisy Ridley, because I mean, to be frank, other than the Rey character being mixed, but Daisy Ridley hasn't had the career that Adam Driver has had post Star Wars. So Adam, people forget that Adam Driver was known, but not known like he is now. Not the multiple time Oscar nominee, not the guy who sells movies, A-list actor that he is now before Star Wars. Star Wars was the kind of the first project that put him on that path. He was a great supporting actor and played a lot of character parts, but he did not do A-list star acting before Star Wars. And so I think he probably has an appreciation for the franchise that I won't say helped build, or I won't say it built his career, but it definitely helped pull him out and make him more of a well-known face amongst the rest of the character actors who were out there at the time. So I think I think if they're interested in it, I don't really see why this hasn't happened. Also interesting hearing that he said pitched it to Lucasfilm because there's so many other people involved in Lucasfilm besides just Kathleen Kennedy. There's obviously they right around that time was when we heard about the news that Dave Filoni was promoted to CCO. So if he was part of that pitch meeting as well, there's also Carrie Beck. There's a lot of other people who, in the rumors of Kathleen Kennedy retiring, might be there to pick up the pieces and move into that president role at Lucasfilm. Do those people also have an affinity for this project? Because if they do, maybe once they're in charge, they also hold a little more sway in getting this made now with the fan backlash as well. So a lot of really interesting things feeding into the story. And I hope we get to keep covering more of it because this is something that I don't think is going to just die. It's going to have legs. It's just a matter of what the actual response is. Unfortunately, as like a big fan event, right? We don't have any more the rest of the year, and we don't have another Star Wars celebration until 2027. So maybe is this a D23 2026 announcement? Is this a Comic-Con thing? How long do we have to wait to hear more about this? Or do they just decide to announce it sometime in the next 6 to 8 months? The fact they were working on a script means they were close to at least entering pre-production, which is already one of the biggest steps of just getting your film off the ground. And if they were close to pre-production, man, this movie probably already would have been out by now, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, let's turn to your guys' questions here about the specific topic because everybody has a lot to say about this. Batasai the Manslayer says, "Hey guys, good to see you. The news has reactivated sectors of the fandom and conversation in a way we have not seen in a long time. Is this Ben Solo movie inevitable now? You say this is bait. How reliable is the affirmation based on your experience of how the movie industry works, which I don't know. How likely is a reaction? How likely a reaction would have to be to make the project happen?" Well, I think this is as good a reaction as really you can get. It doesn't seem like there's anybody who's saying, no, don't make this at all. I mean, sure, there's going to be people out there, no matter what, anything that has to do with the sequels are going to say no, but almost everybody seems universally ignited and at least they're like interested to see what this project is. And I think, as I said earlier, Soderbergh is not your instant box office name, but I think he's a big enough name that if you attach him to a Star Wars movie, people are like, I'm interested to see what that's like. He might not be able to sell Black Bag to a wide general audience, but he can sell. I think he's interesting enough of an auteur to sell a Star Wars movie and like what's his take on Star Wars? I think that alone, coupled with Adam Driver, you already have the star power. It's just a matter of what the script was like to see if they're willing to move forward with the story itself or if it's going to be reworked. But I would imagine they at least revisit it.
Yeah, a lot of the same feelings here. I just don't see how they don't at least be like, okay, the fans clearly want something. We have like a gateway here. Like when Ben Solo gives his life, transfers his life essence to Rey, he slowly like disappears, right? We don't see his body like a Qui-Gon, right? We don't see it like you can say we can play it off as like almost an Obi-Wan Kenobi or something like that, or a Yoda, but it's different because he quite literally gave up his life. It's not like he's just like, "Oh, I'm dying of old age," or "I'm so mortally wounded." Like, he's not the one mortally wounded. Rey is quite literally dead until she is revived by him. So, I mean, if you look at his interviews, Adam really emphasizes saying the word dyad a lot. So he probably had some ideas built out of that. It was probably the most ingenious idea that Rian Johnson added throughout the trilogy, right? It was already kind of there with The Force Awakens, but more as like a connection, as like a string attached. This was like a full-blown like expansion of it in The Last Jedi. And I think JJ did a decent job expanding on that enough, but not like in a super profound way as like what Ryan had achieved in episode 8 with them kind of having their forced Zoom calls, right? So here I'm looking at this like it's not really an inevitability, but there is like a nice little gateway that doesn't necessarily contradict anything. I know Soderbergh has not logged The Rise of Skywalker. He might just actually just like be on YouTube checking clips because maybe he's like, I don't really want to sit through this whole thing or something, right? Maybe he's relying more on Adam and like the filmmaking experience of that, like some ideas from Duels of the Fate that were there before. And especially Adam has talked so much about how the original plan was to make him the inverse Vader to get worse and worse, not get that Vader-esque redemption, right? There are some really interesting things to happen here. But when you say the hunt for Ben Solo, I mean he's redeemed, right? But is he redeemed to the galaxy at large, right? Like that's something that Star Wars has never really approached with storytelling. Like Anakin kind of gets away with it because he dies, right? We're having some sort of comeuppance with Ahsoka, but it's not really the same thing. It's more of like, I you have to understand why these choices were made, what I was going through. We're in different you can't quite literally change what happened, right? You're living a post Return of the Jedi. Like there's stuff like that that's happening. But Anakin never truly seems like he's gonna be like put to like some forced court or something, right? With Ben Solo possibly being, like, trapped within Rey or, like, being able to swap places or in some sort of way alive still, the hunt for him could be on so many different fronts, right? And maybe that is where it's kinda getting confusing, right? Like, even if they said they have a great script, maybe there's some questions that, like, Bob Iger and is not getting the credibility for saying, like, "What about, like, how the galaxy will react?" Right? How about, like, the romantic intentionality behind that kiss almost? Like, are we gonna lean more into that? Are we just gonna say it was, like, a relief moment of, like, true connection in that moment, like how the novel adaptation does it? There's a lot of different things here, and then what does that look like? Is it grounded? Like, is it like chasing through the world between worlds, right? Is that a huge budget expense? Is it something where he's like reborn on a different planet and we're all like chasing after him? How many fetch quests can we do in Star Wars and stuff like that? There's a lot of questions I can see be raised, right? So when we say that it's like a good bait that like by putting it on such a reputable news source and having the director or the supposed director and the main star talk about it doesn't mean it's inevitable, but this is a hugely strong foot forward. We've heard about other Star Wars canceled projects before, right? We've seen George Lucas talk about it for decades and decades. Like, oh yeah, I was going to work on episode 7, 8, and 9 back in the late 80s and 90s. Like we've had a history of Star Wars creatives talk about things that they were working on and didn't fully come out, but never to this like direct extent of like, well, it didn't work out, but we want it to, and we're not gonna directly say it. We want to engage with the fans and see if they really want that to happen. So we can't really say anything about the film industry if that will like be like, "Oh, wow, like, everybody's gonna be riled up," like, "Oh, this is something we wanna see Adam do," or, like, "We're gonna poach him for another film if he doesn't do this, Disney." It's like, we can't really say anything like that, but at least I can say, like, storytelling wise, there may be some issues that, like, they're, like, a little bit concerned about maturity levels, like, what does redemption look like for someone that is really a bad person, especially with like the contextualization of like Legacy of Vader and all that. You can't excuse like a genocidal freak at the end of the day, right? Even if a lot of the Reylos might love him, right, for like that connection and all that. How do you like not undermine what they see in that character? How do you not undermine what people see about like he still did some terribly messed up things as Kylo Ren? How do you like redeem the character? And is that character like a redemption or is it a rebirth where he's like almost like a clean slate? He doesn't have memories or something. Like, is this almost like a Spock when he's reborn in the Star Trek films? Right? Like, there's a lot of different things that again, this is where the concept is so cool, and I'm frustrated because I want to know more and more. But the more you think about it, you're like, okay, I can see the hesitancy at points. I just don't see why you'd stop development. That's where our frustration really lies. Like we've been developing the Rey's New Jedi Order film alongside the Kinberg stuff, alongside Taika Waititi, possibly Rogue Squadron. We're finally on Starfighter going into production and all that. Like it's weird, and I this being delivered as an interview, as, like, a very deep dive, especially when we just had, like, a lot of a mixed reception to Mandalorian Grogu with everybody being like, "Oh, man, I loved how much style and, flavor there was to the sequels, and look how there's no sauce to this, made-for-TV movie. Is this really our return to theaters?" Like, it's super well timed. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think they're like, "This is the chance to, like, pounce." We are seeing some positivity for the stuff that we did, and yeah, I no point in us saying, like, "Yes, this is gonna happen or not gonna happen." We don't know that. We're not really in the industry to say stuff like that. We have an education, but that's not really the same thing as practical experience. But this is, the day and age of social media and how it's so even if we are living in a dead internet, right? It still has such big influence on our lives. It is a way of like parallel existence that we can't ignore. So I really think that this is gonna be like almost like a public pressure setting. There's probably private discussions maybe happening of some sorts. If hopefully they're seeing this and being like, okay, let's at least pull out the script and like talk it out, right? And now that we've got Filoni as the CEO, this is perspective on that. Now that we've moved away from streaming really being like Mandalorian-esque shows and more animation and smaller, more showrunner-based shows again, what does that look like? Like, these are conversations that are already happening, things that are already in flow. Let's make sure that this is not just, like, dropped off because it's like, "Oh, this was such a strong move by Adam and Steven that we don't wanna now we're even less likely to do it." Then why'd you even commission in the first place, right? Like, Bob, you know all this stuff that Lucasfilm is doing. This is very much in their wheelhouse. This is how they want to work and develop creatives and develop storytellers in the Star Wars franchise by bringing them outside, by working them through like a streaming service like Mandoverse and all that, and building them out to bigger shows, maybe bigger projects. At least keep it in on the table. If it's not on the table, right, because of like, "Oh, why this is such a strong move," you're only gonna hurt the sequels that you need to get better and improve and become a full-fledged era, and you're gonna, like, really dishearten a lot of people that, like, "Hey, these creatives that have always, like, kinda listened to us and seen and given us great stories that we might not necessarily have thought about, but have at least, like, listened to us say, like, 'We love this character,' and given us multimedia about them over the years and years of Star Wars, if you're not gonna do that for the most popular character of the sequels, that would be super, super disheartening and super frustrating.
I think too, when you look at the way they've approached this whole era, right? It's gone from no real stories to we were going to have a Ray movie, but the enthusiasm wasn't necessarily there around the Ray movie, plus not being able to find the perfect script, and probably the pressure of that has caused them to look towards the enthusiasm of outside filmmakers, really. Like, they've oftentimes worked within, especially in the streaming era, we've seen Lucasfilm mostly work in-house. They're taking, Filoni, Favreau, Uh, Deborah Chow did some Mandalorian, and then she did Obi-Wan. Robert Rodriguez did Mandalorian, then he did Boba Fett. They've worked very much so in-house. Even Tony Gilroy was somebody they already worked with on Rogue One. They haven't taken too many risks outside of who people they've worked with already. But the one project that has gotten off the ground post Rise of Skywalker, that's been with somebody who's been kind of outside their wheelhouse, especially post Iger coming back at the end of 2022, is Starfighter, and that really seems to have taken the voice and the pressure of a very hot filmmaker off of Free Guy with Disney and then Deadpool and Wolverine with Disney. And Sean Levy's persistence has gotten him a Star Wars movie. And so it seems that if you're of note and you're passionate about it, you can get these made. You just kind of have to be very persistent about those projects. And a lot of these other projects too that have been pitched have been kind of ideas, right? The Taika Waititi one, yes, he was as hot as any filmmaker was at the time that it was announced that he was doing a Star Wars movie, but it never really seemed like he was excited or like had a Star Wars movie ready to go like Soderbergh has with this one. It seemed like they hired him and asked him if he would do one. He said, yes, I'll do one. But it didn't seem like he had this idea that he came to them with, right? I think that's Star Wars is, even at its low points, still such a universal franchise. We talk about how it crosses generations, and we're approaching 50 years. And, my grandparents saw it in theaters. My parents saw it in theaters. I saw it in theaters. And my kids will see it in theaters. But Star Wars, because it's generational, will always have fans who are interested in being a part of it. And so if you're willing to listen to these outside pitches, I think a lot of that can build at least that trust and respect and hype back for the franchise, because when it comes to rebuilding the brand loyalty with Star Wars and the brand trust with Star Wars with the audience, the main thing we've said a million times on this channel is they just have to make good projects. And yes, easier said than done, but they have to greenlight projects they're 100% confident in. They have to go all in with filmmakers that they have trust with and that they are confident have a product that people want to see and are also passionate about that product. I think too often they've approached people with Star Wars when really Star Wars is a brand that people will approach you for. And it's with these pitches that they keep getting. The more and more we find out about these pitches, it seems like they could have their pick of the litter if they let it be known that they were willing to listen. Maybe this is the type of experience that closes those doors, that like, just, people talk, even if it didn't get out to the public. I'm sure Steven Soderbergh talked to some of his other filmmaker buddies and like, yeah, I was going to do a Star Wars movie, but they said no. I had this whole great idea. Well, maybe that discourages another filmmaker of his ilk to be like, well, I could have pitched a Star Wars movie, but I'm not going to do that because it sounds like such a hassle. They by saying yes and being open to it, at least you invite more and more people to approach, right? And so I just think that this is a case study for where they're going. I also do think Disney at the time, if this was pitched at the beginning of 2023, with how much was changing with the new, the reversion back to Bob Iger from Bob Chapek in terms of CEOs, with just the philosophy, and 2023 was a disastrous year box office wise for Disney. Indiana Jones lost so much money. So many of their films lost so much money that year. There was a huge philosophy change by the end of 2023 for them and the way their direction was going. Maybe they just didn't want to commit to something at that point. It doesn't sound like there were a lot of business reasons why. Otherwise, I don't think they would have come out with been us forward with this information. Um, it seems like it was more story wise, but maybe nowadays they'd be more open to it because they do seem to be a lot more selective and a lot less committed to being like, we're going to do everything we said we're going to do, and that's our word is final. Right now it seems like they're willing to say, hey, if this project's not working, let's not make it, because we don't, one, can't afford to lose money on a project like that, and two, We need to rebuild brand loyalty. So I think that's your best shot for getting this made again is just the fact that, that if the fans want it, they'd be willing to listen. Because right now, when it comes to box office, I mean, every franchise is just desperately seeking anything that the fans actually want to go see because they need hits. And that's also the problem with this type of project, right? And at the end of 2025, October 2025, everybody wants to see this. By the time it gets made, if it's in theaters in 2028 at the earliest, right? Is everybody still like, yes, that's the project I really want to see? Whereas other projects, other releases come out and change the way we look at Star Wars. Maybe people want to go in a different direction with Star Wars. Who knows? But that's always the tough part when it comes to these leaks. Is like when Deadpool leaked, we were in the golden age of the superhero movie. It was like, okay, if you don't make it now, when are you going to do it? Right now, we're in a very much so flux state for blockbusters and a flux state for Star Wars. It's hard to say that they can look at the enthusiasm and be like, well, we have a guaranteed hit because nothing in today's world is guaranteed hit. And sci-fi fantasy is definitely a volatile franchise right now in terms of box office results. I think Star Wars still commands a certain level no matter what, but we'll see how Mandalorian and Grogu does and Starfighter to really say Star Wars is an instant at least 500 million in theaters because I think we're going to have varying levels of success amongst those projects. But yeah, thanks for that question. Batasai also says, um, wait, I lost my spot. Many characters have been brought back to life because rebirth and resurrection are powerful concepts in mythology. Although in universe, most, if not all, have not been really dead like Maul or Palpatine, but Ben Solo in his story incarnates the concept itself. He incarnates the message of hope, healing, and rebirth of Star Wars. The whole myth can be healed through him and through a relationship with Rey. This is the purpose that don't have any other project. You can have stories post Rise of Skywalker hundreds of years in the future, but those won't be nothing else than repetition of what came before. But this brings the myth full circle, healing to the tragedy of Skywalkers. This news has apparently had a powerful impact to unite all sectors in the fandom, even those who are anti Disney. I can only hope the unity is enough to make this happen. I worry that Adam gets too old. That's another factor for sure. Is if you want to tell Kylo Ren stories, now's the time because he is the oldest of those actors, or he and Oscar Isaac were the two oldest, and he's only going to get older. It's going to be harder to tell pre Force Awakens stories, especially with him. But I understand what you mean, Babsai. I mean, I think all of us want to see at least some credence, or not, I wouldn't say all of us, but most of us who have don't have an agenda against the sequels want to see some credence given to the story post Rise of Skywalker and try to at least build out a universe. um, I see both sides. I think you can tell incredibly interesting and wholly unique stories without rehashing Star Wars by jumping way into the future. So I disagree with you on that point. But I think if you're going to tell stories post Rise of Skywalker, we'd like to see all aspects of it fleshed out. And if you're not going to do the Ben Solo thing, I think you lose a big piece of what the sequel's purpose was and what, despite its convoluted storytelling and messy plots and messy connection across the three films, what was the one kind of thread that felt like it was brewing between each film. If you just completely ignore Ben Solo and you don't touch on anything else with him, I think you lose a big piece of the spirit of what those movies actually gave you, which is going to make it hard to continue with their themes and their characters if you're not touching on one of the most important and biggest things in those movies.
Yeah, I, I mean, I don't know. It's a bit of a doozy of a question, I'll admit, saying like this will be like the healing of the tragedy of Skywalkers. I mean, uh, you could argue that letting them die as a lineage is for the best because everybody's trying to manipulate their midichlorians and just their power scaling. That's kind of an issue too in Legends as well. That like, hey, this lineage is so powerful, but they can either be like the greatest heroes of the galaxy or like one of them goes wrong and then kind of sets us back, right? But this is this is different, right? We live in a canon that has visual media at its forefront, and as that purpose of that visual media is to tell more concrete, definitive storytelling that doesn't get upended by another piece of multimedia, like a lot of Legends theoretically was and often was with like ensuing storylines post New Jedi Order and those original books. So yes, I don't know if I would say that the comeback is the most important piece. It's just the most appealing piece because this is something that for a long time we've been sequestered away from the sequels. We've kind of just been so focused on the Mandoverse, and now all of a sudden we're hearing like the star of the sequels, arguably, is saying, "Hey, I'm not like John Boyega, where I'm having like a lot of mixed messaging about like ever working with Disney and some of like the misleading usage of like a minority lead and just mischaracterization of his role between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and then The Rise of Skywalker between Ryan and JJ. Like this is somebody who got a pretty good end of the stick despite like the ending of episode 9 of all the characters, is a star, like a true like critical darling. And he's saying, "No, I have a lot of interest in actually like taking this character to its fullest potential." And yeah, of course I want to see that. And of course everybody wants to see it. But like the healing of it, I mean, I'm not so sure, right? Because arguably what he was most interested in originally and how it was pitched to him, when he first joined The Force Awakens was like, "You will be inverse Vader. You won't actually heal the Skywalker lineage. You're gonna end it forever." And I don't know how well that would have sat with people. Maybe that's why they were like, "Oh no, no, we can't do that for episode 9. Like that'll be horrifying." All right, like that after everything, like with the reception with the Last Jedi and all that, we're gonna have Kylo be even worse and become even more like Vader and take it a step beyond, right? Like I don't know. That I can see why we went ultimately with like a safer, happier, more Reylo based story for Ben. But this concept of redemption and all of that, right? Like, and the hope, the message of hope, the message of like being able to undo your biggest mistakes, right? That is always a huge part of mythology. I'm not going to deny that. But how does that play out in Star Wars? That's gonna be tough. Like the closest example that we have of someone that actually gets redemption and still faces consequences is Eula Droma from Tales of the Jedi. He literally has his powers and his connections to the Force stripped away, and he lives in exile, and then he ends up training his former lover's daughter, who is his daughter, and he has a tragic death, right? But he actually finds peace again. He can't undo the fact that he killed his brother. He can't undo the fact that he turned to the dark side committed, the Mandalorians and Exar Kun to ravage the galaxy. He can't change any of that. He's not gonna get back his lover. Like, all these things that were good, like Anakin, fell away, and he also suffered, right? But his suffering wasn't like, "I'm stuck in a metal suit." It was like, "I don't have a connection to, like, the most important thing that gives me, like, literal life force to me." And how does he live past that? How does he move beyond? How does he actually make up for realizing he made a mistake and turning back to the light? It's a process, right? And I want Ben Solo, if he does get a film, to actually deal with that. I don't necessarily think that he has to be like forgiven by the galaxy. I just think that it has to be something where it's like almost like a Sasuke or something else and other like big franchises where it's like we're not gonna forget that stuff, but, the good that he's done since then overcomes and at least negates a lot of the bad, and he is who he is now, and we have to take him for his buildup of, like, positive actions and all that, and that's just not something that we have with this character, right? We have so little with this character, because we don't have anything with Ben Solo. Everything we have is Kylo Ren, and Kylo Ren is not a great guy. He has moments that leak through that are Ben Solo, like, "Oh, I can't shoot down my mother. I've already killed my father, and it's only broken me more than actually make me double down on that." But he is still trying to wear that mask, that mantle of Kylo. For him to actually be Ben and go through that redemption, it's gonna be a multi-layered process. Maybe this hunt is just a start of that, right? And maybe that's what's making Iger and stuff feel like, oh, what if we just make him suddenly all good and everybody's happy with him again? We probably need like a trilogy. We probably need like an animated show. We need backstory to understand why he even was seduced by Snoke and Palpatine instead of just saying I've always been the voice inside your head, right? Like, there's so much about this character that's so undefined that simply saying, like, he is, like, he's gonna be the healing and rebirth of Star Wars, that he's gonna like be the cleansing of the Skywalker lineage. I can't say that for sure, but do I think that there's a really, really interesting character that can actually deal with some very mature themes and topics for Star Wars that can be very different while still, valuing and, like, still accepting that he has almost a Vader-esque turn to the light once again? Yes, I just hope that we actually get to see the next steps, because we still haven't ever truly seen that with Vader, and we've never seen that with Anakin, right? Which is just kinda like the Force being like, "Yeah, you're the chosen one, and, you've got the power to become a Force ghost, and that's cool, and you're helping Ahsoka now, cool." And I'd love to see more again. That's really one of the biggest appeals for me of Ahsoka season 2. What does he do as, like, a master? What does he do to, like, actually atone for his mistakes? What is his journey through the Force look like past death for him? But for Ben, if he comes back, if he's alive in some form, it's gonna be a lot of steps to, like, actually being the healing, rebirth of the myth of Star Wars, like, as you're putting it. That's just how I look at it. I just don't see it as like "Oh, like, you make this film and suddenly everything's good again." I think that's only, like, the first real step towards Ben Solo, and you still have to do everything pre The Force Awakens with him.
To me, one of those things too is, and I completely agree. I think the Ulick comparison is a really good one. I think that would be the most accurate to the way, or to the same arc for a character that we have seen have to go through a redemption arc. The other ones that I could also see kind of in story being used as is one recently that we saw, Aslan Rel, who was kind of this figure that nobody trusted. He had good intentions a lot of the times, often fell back in into the dark, which I don't know if I'd want to see Ben Solo do that necessarily, but I think the idea of just somebody that maybe Ray trusts the way kind of Yoda and Reith trusted Aslan, but nobody else did. Ray trusting Kylo and nobody else wants to, and everybody's like, I don't know. And maybe he does a few things that are a little questionable as he slowly rediscovers himself. But I think that would be kind of part of it. And the other one is Kip Duron, because I think it's kind of that would be another kind of similar thing. If you are having Ray restart the Jedi Order, you could see some kind of factions start to break through. I mean, I don't think Ben is ever going to be somebody who's completely whole. And this goes into the other thing I was going to say about this whole thing is like, to me, the hunt for Ben Solo could mean so many different things, but one of the things it could absolutely mean is like an internal hunt. It could mean like a rediscovery of yourself, and kind of mentioned it at the beginning of the stream. But like, if we were to get some type of trippy, people said world between worlds, but almost even more so than that, kind of introspective look at the life and legacy of Ben Solo and who he is and what the Skywalkers mean to the galaxy, and just kind of this rediscovery through this almost purgatory-esque journey of like, I don't know where I am, I don't know what's going on, nothing really makes sense, almost dreamlike, but yet I have to do this mission, and on the mission I have to rediscover who I am. And by doing whatever mission he does, he can kind of almost remanifest himself into, it's like he's chosen the right path, and once he's redeemed himself in the eyes of maybe the Force or something, he's able to remanifest. Something like that would be really interesting if they were going to do that. Again, like I said earlier at the beginning of the stream, doesn't really lend itself to the largest audience. If you're saying, hey, let's go watch a spiritual Star Wars movie about, rediscovery and redemption through a dreamlike state where you're going to have to question everything that's going on and nothing's really going to make sense and it's all going to be trippy, but it's going to be all built on the back of character. I'd personally love to see that, but I don't know how accessible that is. But if you did do something like that and he came out of it, right? He comes back as Ben Solo, and Ray's a little mistrusting of him because she's like, I saw you die. I don't know how'd you come back? Then on top of that, nobody else trusts him. So, like, part of her, the dyad part, wants to vouch for him. Everybody else is like, we don't trust this guy. Nobody saw him do what you said he did. We know he kills all these different people. We know he's been a menace for the last 5 years. How can we ever trust him? I do think it builds to a Kip Duron Aslan esque relationship with him and the Jedi Order, because if you had Rey build her Jedi Order, and if you actually still do new Jedi Order in the future, and you have some big conflict, maybe Ben still has a little bit more rash, aggressive style that doesn't mesh well with what Rey wants to do, and it kind of creates dissension in the ranks and a split faction amongst the Jedi. And then, of course, at the end, they'll all come back together and work together, save the day. But like, I think there's a lot of really interesting storytelling you can do with those types of things. So I don't think he'll come back in like I agree with Seneca. I don't think he'll come back as this like ultimate redeemer for the Skywalkers because he really can't be story wise. And if he is going to be that, if he is going to be this kind of like spiritual hermit, then he kind of has to be away from the main story for a while.
Yeah.
He can't really be like a notable figurehead in the galaxy because nobody will be able to rely on him or trust him. I think he'd have to be this kind of wandering hermit who Ray turns to in secret, but you can't let the politicians find out she's working with them. I think a lot of that would have to be the direction. But yeah, cool ideas, Batasai. Thanks for sharing those. A critical thinker says, I don't care for the sequel trilogy. I think the story is pretty much unsalvageable, even at The Force Awakens. That being said, I kind of feel like that's freeing in a way since I don't care where they go in the post sequel trilogy. Just entertain me, go wild, and do something crazy. That's all I care about. So yeah, I'll join the voices saying that nixing this was super disappointing because at least it sounds entertaining. I don't like Kylo, but Driver is a great actor, and I've heard the director is also good. And like the Ben is dead justification is strange right after literally just having Palpatine return. So yeah, I mean, I again agree with you, a critical thinker on that. I think there's a million ways they can bring him back, and a million more satisfying ways than somehow Palpatine returned. Um, I I'm a bigger fan of the sequels than you are, but still as somebody who's mixed on the end result of the sequels, because I still really love Force Awakens or a lot of Force Awakens. Mixed on the end result of the sequels, I think that this is something that if you have talent there, especially the talent who's in charge of bringing the character to life, wanting to do this, I don't really see from the information we have a reason why not to. So hopefully more information comes out that explains why it was ultimately decided not to do this project.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you mentioned it before, critical thinker. You don't care for the sequels, right? That's fair. That's totally fine. But it's nice to see that even that perspective of like I don't like the sequels, but I want to see what comes next because it's an open Pandora's box, right? Like that's cool to hear too. And then it's cool to see that you at least have an acknowledgement of like, yeah, I even if it might not be for me, like nixing something that is probably one of the more popular parts of the film and from being further developed. Yeah, like I think everybody can agree that like with all the structural issues that there are as a trilogy, not necessarily the story, but like as a trilogy for sequels, making it a full-fledged era, making it like where these threads are actually paid off and redeemed, right? Yeah, why wouldn't people wanna see that, right? You could be able to say like, "Yeah, I watched episode 7 and 8, and then, like, I jumped into The Hunt for Ben Solo and saw some clips at the very end of 9," or just been like, "Yeah, no, I watched, 7, 8, 9, Starfighter, and then I jumped into Rey's New Jedi Order, and then did like a sorta pseudo machete order watch and jump back into Hunt for Ben Solo when he makes a cameo or something like that. Like, stuff like that would be really cool for, like, just expanding, like, opening the doors. We're not necessarily gonna see an episode 10, 11, 12 right away until they figure out what makes sense to, like, settle on and make stronger and flesh out from 7, 8, and 9. That's maybe what Kinberg's working on. Maybe he's just working on, like, all these different spin-offs, kind of becoming a sort of Avengers-esque reunifier there or something in that film. Don't know, right? But it's cool to hear that. And then it's not directly related to what you're saying here, but yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of is like the whole Ben is dead justification from Iger. I agree because like, wouldn't there also be if we're really trying to throw out some story ideas like? We have Rey, who is an adopted Skywalker, right? She's trained by Leia, she's trained by Luke, right? She's forsaken the Palpatine name and become a Skywalker because those are the people who showed her love, who are the people who actually took care of her, took her in, right? That can be a pretty powerful story if it continues to be shaped up, right? But imagine by the time of the New Jedi Order, right, you're not just dealing with, like, the different factions and thinking that came out of Luke's Jedi Order and some of the survivors of Order 66 and how they appeared, or, like, the split offs of, like, maybe Kip Durran-esque, more militant Jedi people who are like, "No, we can't be under the Senate, like, we have to almost be like the Senate has to, like, contract us for work," right? There can be so many different things that are coming up in Luke's era alone, which, again, still needs to be defined, that by the time you get to Rey's era, if we suddenly have a Ben Solo show up, right, then there could be like almost like a simplification of all these like philosophies and thoughts. And it's like you have somebody who has been trained by the two Skywalkers who did redeem, the galaxy, who did save us from the tyranny of the First Order and the Final Order. But then you have eventually it's some form of a redeemed Skywalker who is truly by blood a Skywalker. It'll be a very meta film too that you could bring out of a New Jedi Order of like, which Skywalker do you follow? And I think you would have the characters themselves be like, no, we're both two halves of a whole. We're a dyad. Like we're gonna feed off each other, improve each other. But it'd be very interesting to see if there would be people almost take the very Christian allegory of like Anakin, like being a virgin birth, right? And then saying, yeah, but he doesn't really come back alive and step into the natural plane of the world anymore, right? But if we see a Ben Solo pick up that latter half of the story for Jesus Christ and that allegory be done there and being like, why is he alive, right? It's like that's something that even the Force, so far from what we know, has not been able to explain. We've seen Force goes, we've seen like transcending, we've seen becoming part of the greater cosmic force and the living force. But if you have a character that comes back, not necessarily the same, but is again Ben Solo, like, that could really be like, "Oh, wow, that's Skywalker reborn truly back, and we know it's him." It's kinda hard not to, like, be like, "Okay, well, if he is a good guy, if he's done all these good things that we see in The Hunt for Ben Solo and all that, why should we now listen to Rey?" Right? It could be a very meta philosophy and debate between what it means to be a Skywalker. Is it by blood, or is it innate, or is it by what you've learned and what you've actually done to, like, protect the galaxy, protect those in need? There's a lot of great storytelling options, I think, that would also just simplify a lot of the confusion that's probably gonna come and out of Luke's Jedi Academy, with the fact that we're gonna have a very different form of it, even if it is around relatively the same amount of years as like the Legends version is, simply because there was no Legends equivalent of an Order 66. There's no Legends equivalent of survivors like that's um besides like Green Jedi and certain lineages. Like now how canon is, there's so many people who have survived that probably don't want to be Jedi, that have abandoned being a Jedi, who still try to be good, some who become bad, some who adopt an entire different force cultures and ways of using the force. You can make two very different and interesting ways for Luke to approach training a Jedi and what it means to be a Jedi, and then what Rey has to deal with a galaxy seeing a redeemed, reborn Ben Solo come about and being like, "Am I really the Skywalker?" And then seeing what these two kind of challenge each other and lift us off each other and maybe reform the Jedi into. So that it's not exactly answering your question, but there's just so much about like Iger saying Ben is dead, and I don't see why he should come back, that I can't accept, because there's just so much story potential by bringing him back that the rest of your spin-off films, the rest of your post episode 9 films can really benefit from.
Critical Thinker has your question about DC. We'll get back to that in a little bit once we get through the rest of these comments about the Ben Solo thing. So we'll come right back to that. Father Karras, who says the notion that Soderbergh wanted to and was actively developing not just a franchise film that wasn't Oceans, but a Star Wars movie is effing wild. So intrigued as to what Hunt for Ben Solo would have been. Yeah, I think we all would love to, like, if this movie never happens, I think we'd all love to at least just have like a Duel of the Fates-esque leak to see what this would have been. Odd Star Wars 5 says, I still think he's going to be back. This kind of ensured if there is a Ray movie, he will be in it. They can't touch anything post 9 now without backlash and him attached. Hunt for Ben Solo would have something would have something world between worlds. We have been speculating for years. Ray would probably go looking for him. Yeah, and I think, if you did the haunting thing, if you did like he was in her head because of the dyad, if his spirit was really absorbed into her, you could do this whole thing where he's talking to her the whole movie, leading her to the place that he's found through the force that will bring him back. And I think that's something you absolutely could do. I think it's a good point to make that like now that people know there's genuine interest from Adam Driver, then it will be the elephant in the room now that pretty much anything they do post sequels with those characters, if he's not a part of it, there's going to be that question constantly, not just to him, but to every person at Disney, every person at Lucasfilm, every time there's a Star Wars project post sequels, where is he and is he coming back? And it's going to be the Obi-Wan Kenobi thing all over again. And they eventually caved on that. So I think we will see it in some fashion. I don't know if it's going to be this movie, but I think we will see him back at some point because it is like if you do Ray or you do Poe or you do Finn or you do anybody that's connected, I think you could do Starfighter and still avoid those questions if it doesn't connect to the sequels directly. And if you decide to build out a whole nother side of the post sequel timeline without our main sequel characters, then you can get by without bringing him back. But if you do anything with those main characters in the sequels, people are going to be asking about it nonstop now that we know he's actually interested. And I think that's the big one that they cannot avoid. They can avoid talking about this movie, they can avoid and just let everything brush over, but they can never avoid the fact that people will ask about it if they make any Star Wars post Rise of Skywalker now with those characters.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you mentioned, it is kind of like you said, an ensurement of, hey, like anything that's made now will be like, hey, have we considered what this person said or what their perspective? Like we've already kind of been doing that with John Boyega in a lot more of a negative sense of like, hey, I have no intention, or like, no, Star Wars has got to fix these things. And there's a lot of things that I think John is right about. Like, you do have to really make up for the fact that so much of the Force Awakens marketing was making him a Jedi, him not necessarily getting a very clear understanding of where his character is supposed to go in The Last Jedi. I know Ryan recently was saying, like, it's really based off of him leaving, like, a very conservative, very highly religious background and kind of breaking free of that and moving into a big world for himself, and that's all wonderful and all that, but is that something that he told, John Boyega? Is that something that he workshopped with him? It doesn't really seem like that, right? It might have been inspiration, but it didn't really come about that way, and then since then, John Boyega's just been like, "Yeah, I'm showing up in a critical film here and there, and, I'm having a steady work output, but I'm kinda done with Star Wars," right? And that this is after praising Episode 9 and JJ's return, like, "Yes, he's finally doing me justice," and then still, being positive about JJ despite the fact that probably all the scenes that he was pitched about him actually using the Force, maybe even wielding a lightsaber as a proper Jedi for a few scenes, maybe even, like, keeping some of the Stormtrooper rebellion stuff alive, just didn't come about at all, right? He just has a moment of like, "I need to tell you something, Ray." And he's like, "I know, that she's on the ship there, like, I could it's just a feeling," right? Like, we don't really see him use the Force. We just have him get at max a Leia-esque moment, right? And Leia has been able to use the Force way more than we've seen Finn use it, right? With her, like, even if it is Mary Poppins-esque, she does save herself, right? What are we seeing about Finn in Episode 9 that isn't any honestly, is a worse version of what we got with Leia connecting to Luke in Empire Strikes Back and sensing and hearing him call out for her, right? There's very little to that. So, yeah, we've been already kinda dealing with, like, any time that any post Episode 9 film or story is coming out, we're like, "Yeah, we're gonna get John Boyega back as Finn, and, like, what could his Jedi look like and all that?" And the man himself has, he said some positive things. He's like, if the story is right, maybe it can be down. He said things like that too, but he has been more on record of like, yeah, I don't think I should come back. I'm kind of done with that, right? And now you have the entire opposite of a guy who has been way better received overall by audiences, right? Who is a superstar actor saying like, "Yeah, no, I worked on this." Like, I know Kathleen and Lucasfilm came to me for this, and I found and worked with Soderbergh, and we had a great idea, and it was insane, and then it's just not in the cards anymore. But now it's like, well, he had such a genuine interest that he was actually working on a script and probably having great conversations and actually workshopping this character. Like, even if we never see this for like 10, 15 years, which would be an absolute shame, we now know that this is a guy who spent 2 years of his life at least being in contact with a star director, like a very strong touristic director, to continue that character and continue fleshing it out. So, yeah, I think we will get it back. I don't think we're ensuring anything here, but I think that pressure will just be like, "Hey," like, it's not like a former cast member criticizing the studio and being like, "I'm not gonna come back." This is someone who's like, "I wanna come back and double down and make it bigger and better and more meaningful than before," and then when nothing comes out of that, 2 other star actors, had other great talent looking at Disney and Lucasfilm be like, "Oh, yeah, I wanna do that for my character. I wanna come back and join the franchise." "Oh, but, I heard Adam didn't really get a chance, you know, he was so excited to," right? Like, it's gonna be in everyone's mind no matter how they wanna bury it, no matter how they wanna keep it quiet. It's gonna keep brewing. I don't know if we necessarily get a hunt for Ben Solo, but I think we're gonna get Ben Solo become a major, at least supporting character in 1 or 2 films here in the next 10 to 15 years. I'm betting on that. It's just a full solo film like how it's described, maybe that's where we're not quite sure if that's gonna land, but him returning, I think it's brewing. It's gonna be like Ewan McGregor, except Ewan's not gonna lie about it, right? Adam's gonna be like, "Yeah, no, like, it's happening now." I think we got them to buy into a little bit more of our vision.
Chris Schober says, "Do you think Luke's Force Ghost would have been involved in the hunt for Ben Solo?" I hope so. I mean, if it is like obviously, again, we don't know anything about what this movie would have been, so I'm going off of what my in my head I would do with this type of story. And if it was some type of spiritual rediscovery of the Skywalker lineage, rediscovery of who am I as Ben Solo and what am I supposed to be and what am I meant to be, what did I become, and all that type of stuff. I think Luke would be amazing to have in that role, and it's something that Mark Hamill could still actually very easily do and very easily be a part of, and I would love to see it. Been begging for them to bring Mark Hamill in a little bit more, whether it's an animation or whether it's close to Force Awakens Luke, where I think he could still play that Luke for at least a few more years. Doubt we'll ever really get to see that, but I think you got to have Luke as part of that story, and so hopefully we would see that. And as Odd Star Wars 5 says as well, Anakin would have been awesome to see in that. You can't really do Leia, but it would have been awesome to see Leia. It would just been awesome to see everybody who kind of shaped the Skywalker lineage, shape the entire story. Obi-Wan, all of them kind of be a part of it, and I think you could, in that way, you know, that scene that everybody wishes we got the version of at the end of Rise of Skywalker, where we got to actually see the ghosts and the voices and everything at the end of the movie. You could kind of do that and reunite Star Wars under this one character. And we've talked about that in the past, how a lot of what shapes this character should really be on the fact that, unlike Legends, there's only one heir to the Skywalkers, and the pressure of that and the pressure of who your parents are and who's your uncle and all of the weight of the galaxy being on you are the future. I think that should be something this movie really goes in on, and it should also be as a culmination of generations, as Luke kind of says to Ray, you know, the 1,000 generations live in you now of the Jedi. That was supposed to be Ben, and I think when we see, hopefully, if we saw in that movie all of that kind of come into him and he starts to fully accept the burden of his life and what he was supposed to do, and part of that helps him be reborn, I think that would be really cool. So yes, I would have loved to see Luke in that story.
I mean, yeah, why wouldn't you want Mark Hamill to come back? I know he's like, "I'm done," but, like, he said he's been done for a lot of stuff, including Joker at a lot of times. I think Joker's a little bit more concrete because of Kevin Conroy's unfortunate passing, but I think Luke, he's still got a couple more appearances in him, or at least consultations, and this is one where he can be the hero Luke, be the legendary master, the beacon of good, and still actually continue looking like how he did in the sequels and bridge that personal gap and divide that he sees, right? Even though he's been much more positive about the sequels and how he's talked about the sequels, he is also very flip floppy. So giving him the opportunity to be like, all right, you talked about it plenty. Like let's see what it'd be like if we can let you almost be like a test or a trial for Ben as he works to rediscover himself, works to understand where he messed up or what was his responsibility, what wasn't his responsibility. Maybe flashback to him haunting Kylo Ren after Episode 8, like that film implies would happen more and more, right? And continuously so. Would be awesome. Absolutely would be awesome. Do I think it's necessary? No, because I think once you do Luke 2, I'd also want to see Harrison Ford, and I'd also want to see Leia, and I can see the like, oh, Harrison can't be a Force Ghost. Sure, why not, right? But we're also playing in an entirely open sandbox here of like, well, if this guy is going to be reborn through the Force, what does that look like? What does he interact with? Is this going to be kind of like how we have in Fate of the Jedi, where Luke and Ben can kind of meet Mara again and all that? Like, is there going to be just some really strange Force situation for them that Ben can now revisit his past, revisit himself? I mean, even canon comics, in the 2020 Star Wars line, there's like this very, very interesting planet where it's like a fungi, right? It like keeps a memory of everything that any Jedi, any visitor has had, like an image, a copy of them. And you have Luke talk to Elzar Mann, right? Not the Elzar Mann of the end of the High Republic, but someone at some point in his life where he's not able to say what happened to him, but can make some guesses, can have a better understanding of and perspective of like, hey, the Jedi fell again. All right, I've heard about that happening 4,000 years ago. There's so many different lessons that this guy can have, and the Force can provide in many different ways for him. So if Luke is one way, sure. Um, I just hope at least it'd be Luke and Leia. I don't know if you can do a Leia recast for at least an older Leia, at least not this early. And I don't know if I'd really want a deep fake version of that, to be honest, right? I'm already very hesitant about seeing maybe like a deep fake Leia for Ahsoka season 2. So, eh, sure, I wouldn't mind it just to like make up for a lot of the stuff that was implied to happen after The Last Jedi, and we never really get to saw in The Rise of Skywalker. And for Mark to have a chance to really embody an older version of the hero that he views Luke as and wanted the story to like really more emphasize instead of just, his one scene in episode 9. Does it necessarily have to be there as like a linchpin for this hunt for Ben Solo? I don't think so, because if we are really trying to move past the legacy of the original trilogy characters and build out the legacy of the sequel trilogy characters, you kind of have to let them do some things on their own, right? It can't just be like, oh, like here's a nice member Mary about this Jedi or this person you met, or like someone from the prequels, someone from the High Republic, someone from the Old Republic. You can't just like throw in characters like that, especially with a character like Ben, where he doesn't really have many very strong background characters from his past and stuff like that. He is an open slate, so why not just let him continue to be an open slate and just work more on his psyche as opposed to like, oh, we now have a World Between Worlds, letting us see all these different Jedi and characters that can give him perspective or help him learn, like maybe one or two, but and maybe a Luke, but I don't think it's necessary.
We have Chris again who says, "Do you think they would make a clone of Supreme Leader Snoke with Emperor Palpatine's blood?" I mean, I think they kind of already did. um, that's what Snoke really is. But he is a clone of Palpatine, for lack of a better word, than he is of himself. So again, if we were doing some type of life and legacy of Kylo Ren and the Skywalkers and stuff, I'd love to see more of Snoke. I know a lot of people hate Snoke, and I mean, right now Snoke is a nothing character, but he can be more, and there's something interesting there. I mean, we know he fought Luke at one point, so how he got his scar. We know he kind of breaks away from Palpatine's not fully under Palpatine's thumb, or is he? And if he is, how does Palpatine control him, and like without him knowing? So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there, but no, I don't think we'll see like another clone of Snoke. I think that would be a little overkill. But we could see flashbacks or whatever into Ben's initial meetings with Snoke and what Snoke was like, which I would love to see, especially the like early training between Ben and Snoke, because we didn't get that in Rise of Kylo Ren. So that's something that we want. I want to see how the Snoke in that completely shifts into the Snoke of the Last Jedi, Force Awakens, where he's a lot more intimidating and scary, rather than the facade he puts on for Kylo in that comic.
Yeah, yeah. Snow could be someone I'd actually love to see in a Hunt for Ben Solo. I know you said about the scar, and there still is that implication that Luke and Snoke fought at some point. But then we also see like the Snoke clones in on Exegol that also have the scar. So it's like how much of that was a man just being a master manipulator, and how much of that was just aesthetic, right? Like maybe like he did actually get scarred, and then all the Strandcast versions of Snoke 2, Snoke 3 also somehow got that reflected on them. It'd be very interesting if they're, like, all kind of puppets linked together that cannot, like, be individuals, right? Like, this is just the active version. These are all the disabled versions, but they still face the same issues, the same degradation. Like, there could be some cool things there. I just think they didn't really think that far ahead, and they're like, "Oh, crap. We were supposed to, like, imply that Snoke and Luke um, resulted in that scarring, and now we just have to, like, let it sit aside for the time being. But, yeah, this whole idea of, like, a Snoke clone with Palpatine blood, that is what Snoke is, right? Like, he is a strand cast. It's different from a clone in the sense that a clone is supposed to be a direct 100% copy. Strand cast is, like, a combination of things. We see like the implication in the Darth Vader comics that Luke's hand, which was recovered, also a lot of the blood and a lot of the midichlorians and everything, his genetics there was used to kind of shape Snoke too. So there's some strange connection between Snoke and Luke by blood into some degree. It's Palpatine. It might be ancient Sith magic. There's a lot of different things that go into Snoke. It's not just a singular like Palpatine clone like we would see in Dark Empire or something like that. It's a form that he ultimately finds very unsettling and, insufficient for what he wants, and also just is kinda disgusted by, and that should be something that we explore a little bit about, like, being discarded if there are moments where maybe he realizes he's a pawn, he's being controlled, maybe there's moments where he breaks free of that control, maybe he has, like, an extended period where he has broken free of Palpatine's control, and is that's why he's able to influence Ben more towards him and his machinations and not what Palpatine has planned through Snoke, right? There's a lot of things there that can be explored. But again, like as we talk about this more and more, right? Like a lot of the stuff that we want to also see in Hunt for Ben Solo is looking to the past, frankly. And as much as like we could see some really cool psychological stuff, I don't know if that carries an entire film for Ben. At some point, I just want to start getting like an animated show, a couple books, stuff like that to like build out pre The Force Awakens Ben Solo, so that way the hunt for Ben Solo can reference things, can build off of stuff like that, it can add new stories in that era, but B, it's a step forward, like, to his new legacy, to his new path forward, to his path of redemption. It's almost like the more we talk about it, the more it almost feels like so much of his redemption is also understanding what we're going back to, what are we redeeming back towards, right? And it's like, again, we don't know that yet either, which is really frustrating. So maybe that's another reason why Iger's like, no, like I don't see how that makes sense. Like maybe the script presented does a lot of like exposition, a lot of like making up stuff, and Iger's like, as a businessman, I want to actually have a couple books, a couple games, a couple shows to flesh out him throughout the decades of his life. And this one film almost would negate that possibility that maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
Next up, we have Jerome, who says the Ben Solo movie would possibly help answer many things for the new trilogy. Yeah, hopefully, and if the new trilogy is still happening, we will see. I think it is interesting that we just haven't heard anything about Kinberg at all since last year, and I'm pretty sure it was last like November-ish, right before Skeleton Crew. We got that news. So that's one that I don't even really think about that much anymore when it comes to future Star Wars projects, and that's supposedly, the biggest. So we'll see if that actually happens.
Yeah, I I don't know. We'll see. That's the best way of putting it.
Chris says if they make this movie in the future, then I would love to see the world between worlds for it, but imagine if we get flashbacks of Supreme Leader Snoke, clone of Emperor Palpatine, bloodline Luke, but Luke versus Snoke and the world between worlds. Well, I think if you get flashbacks, I don't know if you would get. I mean, I guess if you're saying using the world between worlds as a vehicle to see a Luke versus Snoke fight, then sure. But I don't know. Like, I don't think they're gonna do a full on clone of Snoke, Chris. I think that would just be, a little redundant because we've already seen so many clones of clones of clones, whatever, over the years. But I do think you have a shot to see a flashback of Snoke when he was in his peak as supreme leader, and then we will see, how that plays out. But it would be cool to see World Between Worlds. I think they would do. I don't know if they would do exactly World Between Worlds, but I think they're going to do. The idea of the film would probably deal with some type of, you know, outside realm that was part of the force that helped bring Ben back because I think the one thing you just couldn't do that audiences wouldn't accept, and if this was part of the story, then I can see why they would have turned it down, is just he's back and there's zero explanation whatsoever. If they did that, then I could see Iger saying, well, we just got lit up for somehow Palpatine returned, so we're not doing that again. So unless you guys want to give us an explanation for how, we're not doing it. But if they have some type of explanation, but it's not as spelled out, I think that's good enough. You need something to do with the cosmic force rather than just saying, hey, he's back and now he's hanging out with Ray again. Like, that's not going to fly for most people.
Yeah, yeah. I have a similar thought to Liam in that sense of like it'd be cool to get that flashback for sure in this Hunt for Ben Solo to actually flesh out that dynamic more so than just what was laid out in The Force Awakens. Maybe even see a little bit more of the stuff between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi that only like one comic has really touched upon. Just to get to know the master apprentice role and why they didn't choose to be Sith, why they chose to be Kylo with the Rens and Snoke with just, the dark side and being an adept of that, but not choosing to be a Sith. Like, was he beyond it? Was he just, like, wary of what that meant for him and his safety? Like, there's so many things we can really consider about that character. But I do like the idea of, Luke and Snoke fighting in the World Between Worlds. And this is just me kinda thinking out loud here. I do like this idea, right, of kinda dealing with the fact that Luke will never have anything as galactically huge as, like, New Jedi Order and Legacy of the Force and stuff like that, and the fact that he will n well, he might be the leader of the Jedi and everything, and the movement to bring them back into the galaxy after Order 66 and the Empire's rule, it won't be like, oh, he has to do that because a warring species from a different galaxy that is not really affected by the Force destroys and kills trillions of peoples and all their worlds, right? Like, there's no real pressure like that, right? But if we are kinda leaning more into how, like, the sequels did in a really vivid way capture more of, like, this in between worlds, more about this magical sense of the Force again, like, almost making it like wizards dueling and not just, like, old men in the original trilogy that had a couple tricks and then prequel era martial artists. If we really do pick up on, like, stuff like the dyad of the Force, a little bit more of, like, just what the potential of the Force is, it'd be very interesting to see if, like, you can recontextualize a Luke having to, like, not just, like, take his exile because, "Oh, I'm so wrong about what I did with Kylo," but be like, "This is exactly where I need to be," right? Maybe he sees something in the world between worlds. Maybe he does fight Snoke, and he's like, "Yes, I could be the savior of the galaxy. I could be that hero, but I'm doing something else," right? Like kind of how we see Kanan and his sacrifice being made for Ezra, for Sabine and Hera, and then we see, yeah, sure, we can save Ahsoka because I guess we had to save Ahsoka, but if we pull out Kanan from that moment where he saves everybody, then we all die. We all aren't allowed to continue further on our paths in our lives, right? Maybe if we can do something like that and make that relationship between Snoke and Luke a little bit heavier and heftier, why there's a fear about Luke that Snoke really does admit to having, why he wants to turn him, but also still allow Luke to have a big fight sequence and have like a big weight and a big role in the Force, right? Without necessarily having it's like the third or fourth war after the Galactic Civil War, right? That could be something really cool to see. I'd love to see almost Luke kind of take on Force wars as opposed to like government wars, territorial wars that like a lot of Star Wars is based on. Like if it's more of like a spiritual war that he has to almost undertake, and then if that has any way of like reshaping how we look at his sequel life, right? That'd be pretty cool. But if we at least get him fighting on these strange planes of existence, yeah, that I think that's a great way of at least making Luke be a bigger character without necessarily having him be like a general or leading huge battle battalions of Jedi and stuff like we saw in the EU and Legends.
Damn fine cup of coffee says clones simple. The dyad allows him to not be a zombie. Every time he's hunted by someone claiming their pound of flesh, he comes back again. The ultimate punishment, a twist on Sith immortality. So are you saying you want him to be cloned? I'm confused. Ben Solo to be cloned? I'm confused what you're saying, Coffee, but in terms of the dyad, I do think the dyad, there's a lot of stuff you can do with that idea that allows him to be resurrected because it's a spiritual thing. And the way they frame the dyad is almost that he was born because of it. He was born at that time, same as Ray, because they were connected. And I mean, there's still so much to do with the dyad as a concept. It's introduced in the Last Jedi, and then given a name in the Rise of Skywalker, and that's kind of it. We don't really have much there, and Palpatine's obviously very aware of it, but yet we don't know where he finds out about it. So there's a lot of things there with the dyad idea that need to be fleshed out. But yeah, it could be cool. It could be interesting if you do put a twist on that. I mean, in a similar way, if I'm kind of reading into what you're saying too, if it was like he gives his life to Ray to live, and he's at peace and he's accepted that he's going to die, and yet he keeps being brought back over and over and over again, and he's not happy about that because he's like, I sacrificed myself, I want to die, a hero kind of thing. And the Force is like, no, we're not done with you. That type of thing would be kind of interesting to see him eventually come to accept who he is and what his past is and learn to live with himself, because he does get kind of the easy way out. So it would be interesting if there was some type of twist on that. I think that's what I may be gleaning out of your idea. But if it is cloning Ben Solo, if you're saying you would like to see him cloned, I don't want to see him cloned. I'm tired of the cloning thing. We could do that; it would make sense, but I don't want to see that. I'm kind of done with that.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, like a whole. I mean, it's a really a big thing too, even in the EU, but especially in canon, it's hard to clone Force users, right? And even if you create vessels to contain them, like, do they necessarily have the Force in the same way? Not really. That's why, like, the strand cast and using Force magic and all that is what results in Snoke and everything. So, and it's not like it's not like we're gonna have like a Ben too. It's like even when Palpatine dies and has these clone bodies at first, it's just to contain him for a little bit of time until he can actually have something that supports his body. He's like literally forcibly taking over a walking, bag of flesh. That's kind of how we've really approached Force users and like clone bodies. It's not really like Star Killer and getting a second version of Star Killer. and like having them go psychotic and stuff like that. We don't really have that sort of view of cloning in canon, right? And if we were to just clone Ben, it's like, okay, and then why? Who approves this? Like, are we gonna get Kaminoans have been wiped out, right? We've seen that in Bad Batch. Like, is there somebody who's able to match their expertise and can handle raising clones in a way that Palpatine was not aware of and able to like kind of force into servitude, right? I just don't see that personally. I do like the idea of that, like he does get killed and hunted over and over again, but the Force keeps on like reviving him, and then people have to be like, okay, he's trying to do the right thing. We've also allowed to get our comeuppance, and like he gets to be killed again and again and again. And I'm glad. Like, okay, you killed this person, therefore I have to kill you. Bam, you're dead. Comes back again, right? Like, it is like a tortured servitude that you kind of put him under. But at some point, I'd like the story to be like, okay, he's done everything. He's still trying to be a good person. He's willingly saying like, to atone for my sins, do what you will with me, right? And if it means death, sure. And he's trying to almost escape that cycle and he just can't. That'd be pretty interesting. I can't say I personally would love that of like people like constantly killing him and then the dyad being like, nope, just take another life, right? Keep going, keep going, keep going. I don't know if that would be super interesting, right? But could it work? Maybe like once or twice. I think once you get past a handful, it's like you didn't even do that with like Dark Empire versions of Palpatine with like the multiple clones that he had. And it was already redundant there. If we have Kylo be hunted down, die multiple times, still come back like that, I don't know. It's like critical thinker saying respawning in a video game. Like, it's not really something that I'd like. It's not like a yeah, if you've seen like Tron Ares or something like where you're rebooting a program, it's not the same. It's supposed to be someone's life. It's supposed to be someone who's very entwined and redeemed and connected to the cosmic and living force. If it just becomes like respawning, then like what, someone's gonna figure out and hack it and so everybody can do it. Like I don't want that.
Well, and also thinking superficially, one of the big complaints about Ben and Kylo is the lack of power we see him display. I mean, we see him do some pretty impressive force feats, but he never really wins ever in these movies. And so if he just were getting killed by random people, I mean, yes, giving himself up to their judgment is different, but if he were to be losing fights too, I wouldn't really want to see that. I would hope that whatever he does makes him a little bit more entwined with the Force to the point where he gets even stronger. Because I would love to see, the full power of the Skywalkers through him at some point. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what direction they choose. Father Karras says it was Celebration London where they announced 3 movies and had Daisy on stage, and still nothing of any of those projects. Instead, we're getting 2 films that didn't even exist then, and now this. Yeah, I'm not really sure. That must have been a comment based on something we talked about earlier. But yeah, we again, like all those things that were announced at Celebration London, I think are pretty much non-existent or in a flux phase. I think the Ray movie was ambitious. Again, another project that was born out of hiring a creator who pitched them to work on something, but then moving on from that creator, I think it really lost a lot of its luster. What was it going to be? I'm not saying that Lindelof's script was amazing or anything. Obviously, I didn't read it, but I think when you move on from the original intent, it's hard to bring in fresh eyes and re-grapple with what is the story here. So I think along the way, it seems that the Ray project might have just morphed and changed into so many different things and so many new ideas post Rise of Skywalker that they're definitely in limbo on that one. And then I think Filoni's movie was going to be a capper, but then after the lukewarm reception to Mandalorian season 3 and Ahsoka, and the down viewership across the board for Disney Plus products, I think they decided, hey, let's try to get this universe going in theaters and see if we can do the Filoni project later when more people are familiar with these characters. And then the Mangold one, I think that was just more typical Lucasfilm wishful thinking, hoping this happens. But yeah, it's a bummer because this project seems like around that time it was canceled. But since those projects aren't happening anymore either, you never know with this type of thing as well. At least this one wasn't announced and then seems to never happen. This one was a behind the scenes thing, so it could always come back into play. You never know. It's all about the name of the game is figuring out what's gonna be sellable at the theaters right now. And if this is something they think they can sell, they probably will revisit it.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this on stream before, just the fact that anytime they announce something, right? To be fair, a lot of it has been through trades, through like
Yeah.
leakers and stuff like that. But to go on stage and be like, "We're gonna do this. This is Rey's next film is coming out, and it's gonna be connected to Dawn of the Jedi, just like Ahsoka's gonna be connected to it. It's gonna be a little bit all like sort of semi-related. There's gonna be some interesting threads between the three, and that's why we're announcing them together. And then we're also gonna do the Filoni like capper. Cool, awesome. But like you made a very official announcement there at the biggest fan event for Star Wars, and then nothing, right? So we've heard about I think Star Wars and under Lucasfilm and under Disney stewardship of Lucasfilm has gotten a little bit of an overblown rep in the sense of like, oh, they keep on announcing stuff that never truly happens. They themselves have not announced particularly too much, but when they have, like they did at 2023, and then you see that we're finally on production on Starfighter, we're just months away from Mandalorian and Grogu. It's like, well, what's going on, right? Like, do they really have a plan? Like, are they just reacting? Who are they listening to and stuff like that? So that does not really inspire confidence. I will say that for sure. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird to now consider that at the same time when all this was happening, Soderbergh and Driver were like actively ready to start pitching a full script. Probably paired pretty well with Jedi Order or whatever version that Charmin and, Daisy had known about before they entered the stage at Celebration. That just it's really weird. Like, it's like almost like there's different factions in Lucasfilm, maybe like a Filoni faction, a Gilroy faction, whoever, whatever, right, that is, like, creating these different versions of the universe, and then whichever one actually gets traction is actually being built out. That's what I find a bit concerning. More recently, it seems to have calmed down. I think since Mandalorian Grogu and Starfighter, Mandalorian Grogu kinda doing the whole pitch of, like, "Let's take the Mandoverse, what worked there on streaming, leave streaming behind, make these, like, 90s Star Trek mid-budget films, finish up the first 10 years of Star Wars post Return of the Jedi, and then we can develop other multiple different projects for sure." And then you'll have the second timeline of, like, the post-sequel era, building everything out with Starfighter, not necessarily depending on just the sequel characters. I think they're a little clearer on that now. This is where A Hunt for Ben Solo could probably still fit in the latter for sure, and you could take your time with reintroducing these sequel characters and let them cameo, let them have, like, a couple stealing scenes, and then they actually get to lead another movie in a couple years after that. That seems a little bit more grounded and cognizant of, like, the struggles that they had at announcing stuff before. Here, okay, we can at least still work through things that make sense for us right now. That's how I look at it. It is weird, though. It is weird, like, to then be where we are right now with this 2 timeline thing and then suddenly have this huge, huge concept of a project with the biggest sequel trilogy character, and now you're saying that it's been entirely canceled. It's like, what has been going on? It just feels so weird to really consider.
And then Father Karras clarified that it was in response to when we were talking about the timeline of when this was being pitched. So yeah, I mean it is weird that this was around that time. But so this to me falls in between like the Ray project and the Mangled project, where the Ray project had already gone through multiple drafts, multiple writers. Like it was they were well into it and supposedly, had already greenlit it. This was more in the pitch stage and the script was being written, which is also kind of another weird one, right? Because legally, you can't write a script for a project that you aren't greenlit to make if it's a copyrighted project. So, you can't legally write a your own Ben Solo movie and then pitch it to Lucasfilm. They have to have already agreed to give you the money and make it before you're allowed to write the script.
Right.
So that's where none of this kind of makes sense too, is like if there was actually a script being written, then there was either miscommunication or they backtracked on it late, or the script thing is an overstatement by Soderbergh and Adam Driver that, there was an outline maybe, but there wasn't actually a script. Because that's where I think one of the most interesting parts of this whole saga is just like if there was actually a script, that means Lucasfilm told them to go ahead based on their pitch to Lucasfilm. And then later on, Disney decided, "Hey, we don't wanna do this. We don't like the idea," or maybe they read the initial draft of the script, and that's when they decided not to do it anymore, but they were okay with it on initial pitch, because that's where none of this really adds up. So I think that's another thing we're gonna have to figure out over time, as well. So very, very intriguing. But we're running out of time here. We wrap this up about the 2 hour mark. So we've got about 10 minutes left. So send in those last questions, those last thoughts. If you want to make sure you get on tonight's stream, send in a super chat. I'm going to scroll back up to what Critical Thinker was saying about DC just because commented that so early in the stream. I want to make sure we get to that. And we'll scroll back down and try to get as many as we can in before the 2 hour mark. So Critical Thinker was saying in other news, DC seems to be doing good right now. All in slash absolute line really feels like Rebirth 2.0, though I haven't heard if Nightwing or Titans have improved from their, in my opinion, mediocre Tom Taylor runs. I have not read enough of everything to fully agree or disagree with you, but I have been really impressed by Absolute. I am caught up with Batman, and for the first time in years, am actually reading a book single issue. So I really, really have enjoyed Batman. Absolute Batman. I think Snyder's doing great work, but he always does great work with Batman. So he's easy to trust with that. I did read volume one of the hardcover of Absolute Superman. Thought it was really interesting. Excited to see where it goes. Wasn't completely bought in, but I thought the ideas were fascinating. And I still haven't read Wonder Woman. I'm not reading singles for any other characters, but I heard Martian Manhunter in particular was really great. So I'm looking forward to reading those. As for KO as well, I'm reading singles for that. But yeah, it's a fun time to be a DC Comics fan right now. A lot of cool stuff coming out, and it seems like just in general, people are really enjoying it. So hopefully you are too, Critical Thinker. And Critical Thinker says, "Yeah, Absolute Batman is great so far. I haven't been reading Absolute Superman though, because I just personally am not a fan of the premise." Yeah, personally, I mean, it seemed a little New 52 dark, kind of that style for Superman. And reading it, I can't say it's not, but it's I don't know. There are a lot of intriguing ideas for it that I want to see where else the story goes, but I'm not 100% sold on it the way I was after reading one volume of Batman, and then after reading volume one of Batman, deciding to fully get in to singles on Absolute. So I don't know. But it's good. I definitely think it's a good entry point as well. Like I would say Batman's a good combination of New 52 slash Rebirth. Like it's a great entry point, just like New 52 was. But like Rebirth, it seems the whole company seems to actually be unified for once. And like, yeah, it seems maybe every 10 years they get unified under one specific type of story. Critical Thinker also says, I've heard the Absolute Martian Manhunter's great. Got to catch up with that run in Absolute Wonder Woman and feel like Superman being raised on Earth is too important for his character to mess with. Otherwise, he's just kind of Supergirl. I would say check it out because there's some really different stuff. And I think I haven't read past issue 6, obviously, because I'm reading that in trades. But so maybe my thoughts will change. But my jury's still out for me on it. I thought the writing and everything was really good. Art's great, but we'll see. But yeah, thanks for those comments. I can't wait to read Martian Manhunter because I'm a huge Martian Manhunter fan, and Martian Manhunter never really gets comics for himself. So that's pretty exciting. Okay, scrolling back down to let's see, where were we? I think it was Father Karras. Okay, yeah. So a lot of people discussing the idea about the pitch and Odd Star Wars 5 says, "Isn't Reylo also romantic, though? It's a lot of things, but that factors into it." Yeah, I think that's another thing they have to really fully decide. I mean, we haven't really seen it be romantic outside of one kiss. Um, so I think the idea was to leave it as if it was romantic, but if you bring him back, I think there's enough in those characters to where maybe it's romantic or maybe it's not, but they I think there's too much built into their dyad to where, like, it'd get messy again if it was fully romantic. Not that I wouldn't be okay with seeing, like, this, like, king and queen almost of the Star Wars galaxy, like, I think it would be interesting, um, but especially with Rey's ancestry coupled with the fact that nobody trusts the actual Skywalker because he used to be the main leader of the opposition force. Like, I think there's a lot of things you can play with there. If you decided to make it romantic, I think the easier direction is to not make it romantic and just say, yeah, that kiss was building over the course of 2 movies, but, they left it there and ultimately decided it was better for the galaxy to not be romantically entangled, but, I don't know. I can't say that the romance is a firm part of whatever they're doing. I don't think it's ever really established that it's fully romantic. I think there's a lot of undertones. I think they have one kiss, but they're nowhere close to being Han and Leia or or Anakin and Padme, right? Like there's no real build to an obvious romance. And a lot of people too, the kiss kind of came out of nowhere. I know a lot of fans who really didn't pick up on those undertones throughout The Last Jedi and throughout The Rise of Skywalker, which personally I don't get. I picked up on the undertones, but I don't know if I was fully expecting like that type of moment for them. So I think they could easily move on from it if they didn't want to do that.
It's also really weird because the rail part of the fandom, I have not really been someone that's engaged with it, but it was very significant. It was very significant. I don't know if it's like a successor to this sort of like Twilight turned, um, what is that spin-off fanfic
Fifty Shades
series
of
like
Grey.
50 Shades of Grey, like if it's sort of like that because we've also seen Amazon MGM just announced that they're adapting a Reylo fanfic movie, right? It won't obviously be about Rey and Kylo, but they're doing that. And the male lead is Daisy Ridley's husband, Tom Bateman. So it there has been this sort of like underlying embrace, I guess you could say, of like what the Reylos see in the relationship between Kylo Ren. Like, I don't think they. And again, I could just be spewing something here, and a Reylo might be like, "Oh no, you're absolutely wrong," right? Even if I do see some romantic intentionality between them, and some of it's almost like simply because of the diet and less because of like their interactions, right? It's almost like the wholeness that comes by being in each other's presence almost kind of becomes romantic as opposed to like anything there being like, oh, you see me for who I truly am, or you've helped me. You don't really see much of that until like the last moments of nine. But I can I don't know I can see it being developed if we actually get a hunt for Ben Solo and stuff like that. But are we also gonna like actually deal again with the consequences of being Kylo Ren for Ben Solo? Like, even if we see pre The Force Awakens, everything that we see out of Ben Solo and his fall definitely makes a lot more justification, makes it a lot more confusing and a mess and a pressure and all that. Is that still enough to like be like, okay, we're gonna like lean more into the sensibilities of the Rilos once we're doing this whole redemption thing and rebirth for Kylo? That's something I'm not quite sure, and that's where like what is that love gonna look like if Rey, Ben have consultations with each other? Is it simply for training and leading the Jedi? Is it like a exiled member of society who Rey kinda leans on with an internal connection and internal phone call that nobody else can really, like, interfere with? Like, how do you handle that dynamic? And once you start doing that, like, once you have to start, like, acknowledging that there is, also a big part of the fandom, if not maybe the majority, that sees that relationship as toxic, as, like, something that shouldn't be turned into something fully romantic, how do you like balance out their needs and the needs of the Reylos, right? And again, the story at the end of the day, right? I think that's gonna be a really big challenge. Um, and I can see why some people have that sense of like, yes, this is, it's romantic. It has to be, but I don't know. I don't know if it can fully be if we're gonna really like re-alive Ben Solo and deal with all the consequences of what that actually means for the story of Star Wars.
Yeah, no, and I think if you were to do that, then there's just so many questions around, the public perception of the characters. Like I think that the fandom divide there is almost something you kind of avoid as well. Like because there are subsections, like yes, you could cater to the Reylo fans and make that a big part of their stories. But I think that's something they have to kind of rediscover as themselves, right? Like if you aren't just going to jump into like a sub fan culture and be like, okay, well, there's Reylo fans, let's appeal to those people so they come out and watch the movie, then I mean, you can do that, but I think there's other people who are just going to be turned off instantly by that kind of idea. If you give us grounds to like rediscover these characters post Rise of Skywalker, post that moment, just like in any movie, when you have two characters kiss for the first time and they're like, oh, we shouldn't have done that, and then it's awkward for them for a while. I think there is something there that you can play with and mess around with, and it can become, a relationship. It can not become a relationship, but so much of what they do post Rise of Skywalker needs to really be about rediscovering these characters, and within that, maybe they rediscover themselves and realize, okay, yeah, we in that moment it felt right, but right now we're on two different paths here, or we're not able to really reunite. So I think that's going to be an intriguing thing moving forward. But I think we're going to have to wrap up our chat there. Thank you all so much for joining us for tonight's stream, everybody. It was a lot of fun discussing this project. Got pretty much a full 2 hours of this discussion in. So a really cool what if, and will definitely be one of the most intriguing could have beens in the history of Star Wars if this never comes to be. But we'll keep you guys updated if there is anything out of this. I don't expect any information out of this for a while, but maybe some scoopers and leakers get something about, well, Disney's called Adam Driver again and said, hey, what's the deal with this? Why are you sharing all this information? And we'll see where it goes. But that's going to wrap up our stream tonight, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. Final results of the poll were 100% of people who joined us tonight said they would like to see this movie. So if Disney or somebody from Lucasfilm or Star Wars is checking out our stream for some reason, which they actually have before, if they check out our stream for some reason, they can see the vote right there that 100% of the people watching us want to see this film. Hopefully, we get to see some version of it someday, or at least this story told in some form. Let us know your thoughts in the comments if you're watching on replay. If you're joining us tonight for the first time, make sure you join us every week. We do this every Tuesday, regardless of whether there's a big story like this. So if you're interested in just hearing us talk about Star Wars, discussing things with us, Star Wars, pop culture, whatever, join us every Tuesday for that. Make sure you hit that like button if you haven't. Really helps out our channel. More people are watching right now than have hit the like and subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and we will see you all next time.